It's a pleasure to have here today at HSM Specials on Management TV, Neil Racken. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
What's the new reality of purchasing? How customers are changing the way they buy today?
I think there's been perhaps a bigger shift in purchasing than in any other area of business. And the reason for it has been that if you make a saving in purchasing, 100% of that saving goes into your profit. To make a saving in manufacturing, you have to invest in new machinery. To make a saving in marketing, well, you have to make an investment to make the saving. But purchasing leads directly to absolute profit. And because of that, the kind of person in purchasing has changed. 10 years ago, the people in purchasing were not very high level. Mostly they were loyal people who were honest, who worked well for the company, and they were put in purchasing because they didn't do any harm, and they worked with salespeople and with vendors. But now, in the United States, there are many purchasing jobs where the base salary is in excess of $1 million. And it was almost unknown to have a $100,000 purchasing position 10 years ago. So what's happened is purchasing has become more strategic, has become more sophisticated, and the kind of person in purchasing has become very smart and very capable.
What's some of the best ways to sell in a multi-channel world? I mean, we're now, in the old days, we could just had one channel, one way to sell, and now we have so many ways, and that's driving people very confused. So which is your opinion on that?
Well, I think the key rule here is the customer decides. A few years ago, it was very fashionable in channel management to say, let's do what's called channel pruning or channel rationalization. If we have 9 channels, that's too many. Let's cut it down to 3 or 4. But the fact is that the number of channels you have has to be determined by the ways in which customers want to do business with you. So you have to engineer your channels from the customer demand. And very often, customers want to know that a channel is available even if they don't use it. I once worked with a New York bank where they didn't have a good internet channel, and they were losing about 5,000 accounts every month. So they introduced an internet channel and cut that loss right down. But only 100 people every month joined the internet channel. Now, the others wanted to know it was there just in case they wanted to bank at 3 a.m. in the morning. But the demand for the channel was greater than the usage of the channel. But the general rule, I think, is pretty simple, and that is always let the customer determine the channel that they want to use to do business with you. And that's why studies by McKinsey, for example, on the profitability of multi-channel systems show that the more channels, the more profitable. Even though the more channels means more confusion, more messiness, as long as they're clear that there are available ways for the customer to come to you. And the more ways, the greater your versatility.
Yeah, what are the characteristics of a winning sales force?
Again, the sales force that wins has to do 2 things. It has to focus on the customer. Too many sales forces, even today, focused on the product or the service and not on the customer. All the products are tools to enable the salesperson to do something valuable or useful for a customer. And I think the second thing is this. It used to be, the business model was, you make a great product, and the product has tremendous value to the customer. All the value is in the product. So the job of the salesperson was to show the customer what a good product it was, because the value was inside the product. Well, now there are so many products and so much competition that your product isn't very different from a competitor's product. And so what has to happen now is the salesperson has to create as much value as the product. And that's been a major shift in selling.
And what are the characteristics of a successful salesperson?
They've changed. In the old days, selling was about persuasion. Very good at talking. Selling was about energy. Very enthusiastic, very high energy people. And they succeeded in selling. Today, selling is much more about strategy, about planning, about understanding customers, and about being creative. The good salesperson today is a problem solver, a creative problem solver. If I'm recruiting salespeople, I don't look for people who I think are good at persuasion. I look for people who are good at solving customer problems. That's the central new skill in selling.
And what are the some of the benchmarks that we can use for great sales teams? You know, if we are going to look at companies that are doing a great job on sales management, which are your favorite companies?
I think no one company has got all the pieces right, but there are some companies that are really very good. I like GE, I like IBM, Global Services, but there are many companies that are doing some things very well, and they have common factors. One of the common factors is they invest in sales management. If I'm asked by a company to come in and work with their sales force to improve sales performance, if I have good sales managers to work with, I can do that. But even if I have very good salespeople, if I have poor first-line sales managers, I can't transform the sales force. So the first rule is invest in your sales managers. They're the people who have the most impact on performance. And I'm not talking about middle managers or senior managers, I'm talking about sales supervisors. These are the people. And the tool they use is coaching. And all the good world-class companies have managed to build coaching into the way they do business. Now, every company says, we want to coach our salespeople. We believe in coaching. We think it's very important. But very few do it, because most sales managers are under pressure. If a customer's calling and complaining, if there's a crisis, you don't say, stop, I need to coach my salespeople. But the best companies manage to keep the crisis away a little bit, and they do focus on coaching.
Why isn't sales better taught in business schools?
I was yesterday at a conference in London about exactly this topic. And the reason is that in the past, a discipline like marketing, we had a lot of knowledge. We had a lot of measurement, things that were teachable. And because of that, we could mount programs to give people qualifications. So, for example, in the United States, estimates vary. Between 70 and 100 marketing programs exist for every one program that exists in sales. But there aren't 70 or 100 marketing jobs for every one job in sales. It's almost the other way around. But we produce marketing graduates because we have marketing knowledge that the academics can teach. Sales knowledge is fairly new, but it's coming very fast. In the last 5 years, there have been at least 10 important books written which add to our knowledge of sales in a systematic, scientific way, so that we are building a body of knowledge about selling. And that's a necessary step. The other thing is we're imprisoned by this word selling, because everyone has bad examples of the telemarketer who calls them at home when they're trying to eat their meal and tries to sell them something. We all know what bad selling is like. We know about selling used cars. We know about ways in which selling is cheating and lying and stealing. So these bad low-level experiences have given a bad reputation. So a lot of talented young people who want to go into business and succeed neglect selling because they think it's somehow dishonest.
What are the best ways to increase sales through strategic alliances?
That's becoming more and more important. One of the problems is distribution today has to be thought of globally. And distribution alliances are essential. A company in Brazil or anywhere in Latin America that has a good product and sees opportunities outside of its local market can no longer afford the time to grow its own expansion. You have to find an alliance partner. So distribution alliances are necessary to cope with the speed with which we have to now get our product into the market. But there are other alliances too. What often happens is you only provide part of a solution. A good example of this would be Microsoft. Microsoft has Office software and the Windows platform, but that doesn't make a multi-billion-dollar company because that's a commodity. So what Microsoft did was it built many, many alliances, what it called the Solution Provider Network, 30,000 companies. And those companies all worked in conjunction with Microsoft to do things for customers. So a customer would want to put in some system which wasn't a standard software system. So Microsoft would sell the basic material, but would also bring in programmers, would bring in trainers, would bring in specialist knowledge. And because of that, they could assemble a team to provide a complete solution. And that kind of strategy, which started off in software, is coming into other areas as well. So many of your viewers, for example, are not providing a total solution to the customer problem, they're providing a piece of the jigsaw. And you need to create alliances with the other pieces of the jigsaw to make a whole. And the test that you've done it well, in fact this should always be the test about whether to enter an alliance, is does it enable you to create a value that neither party could create by themselves? In other words, do you make the whole bigger? And if the whole becomes bigger, then that's in the interests of both the collaborators.
Neil, in your books you talk a lot about the Chief Revenue Officer. How does that fit with the Chief Sales Officer or the Head of Sales?
Well, I think this is the new dilemma. What's happening is, particularly in the United States, companies are realizing they can't grow only by acquisition. Acquisitions have become too expensive, they got a bad reputation, and the focus now is on organic growth. Now, what does that mean? It means generating revenue by taking business from your competitors. Now, what are the two functions that do that? Sales and marketing. Those are the two revenue generating functions. But today, sales and marketing usually talk different languages. They believe different things are important. They're often in conflict. And the CEO says, well, when I talk to my chief marketing officer, he's telling me this or this, and when I talk to my head of sales, she's telling me something different. This isn't working. And so a number of companies, for example FedEx or Campbell's Soup or Coca-Cola Enterprises, have recently introduced the idea of a chief revenue officer who controls both sales and marketing. And that way you can be more flexible about using sales and marketing resources. And one of the exciting things that's happening in business is we're starting to see new ways of combining sales and marketing in order to generate revenue better.
Talking about sales and marketing, they have always been a kind of a challenge to get them to work together. So how does that work? You know, what's the best way to have them work together? You know, every company, even small companies, mid-sized companies.
Well, I think it's partly history. Usually sales comes first. A small company, as it grows, has some salespeople, and one day somebody says, we need a brochure, we need to do some advertising. And marketing starts as a sales support function. But very soon marketing becomes interested in big things, segmentation. It becomes interested in branding. And these things are not very measurable, but very strategic. And sales is down there making the business, but not so strategic. And the gulf emerges between them, and they start to speak different languages. What's happening more and more is companies are saying, we need to find ways of putting this together better. We can't have sales and marketing working in a silo. So we must have revenue generating processes where marketing and sales work together. Let me just give you one example. A big sale today is going to cost a company into the hundreds of thousands in order to bid on a piece of business. For example, in IBM Global Services, it will cost them about $500,000 every time they try to get a piece of business, whether they succeed or whether they fail. Now, there are many opportunities out there. Who should decide which opportunity a salesperson should chase? Can we leave it to the salesperson? No, the salespeople want to chase everything. But you can't just leave it to marketing. Marketing isn't close enough to individual customers to know. So more and more, sales and marketing have to work together to decide which opportunities are the winners. And when you look at successful companies, they chase fewer opportunities in more depth. And the way they decide which opportunities to chase are by combining sales and marketing. So they work together to make those decisions.
And how are the new measurement concepts being used to increase sales?
I think the first big thing that's happened is sales is no longer about volume. Now, sales finally is about profitability. You see, what the old model of selling was based on was the idea that a big customer is a profitable customer. And so if we have a big customer, we'll do anything that customer wants. We'll put big resources there, we'll put our best people there. But now, it's no longer true that your biggest customer is your most profitable. It may be in the middle market your most profitable customers lie. And as we begin to find we haven't enough resources and we have to put them where they have the most impact, many companies are moving away from segmentation based on the size of the customer. So they don't have a key accounts that are very big, and then territory accounts, and then tele accounts, just based on size. They're beginning to base all of their decisions on the lifetime profitability of a customer. And that brings different ways of thinking about how to segment your market and how to use your sales force.
Which is the best way to avoid getting to the point where you don't want to work with the customer any longer because he's not profitable for you. So how to avoid getting into that trap?
I think the first thing is realistic metrics all the way. Many companies are coming to find that an important selling skill is no longer about how to get the business, it's how to avoid bad business. How to keep themselves from getting trapped in a customer who's using all their resources and not giving anything in return. The role of the good salesperson is to make sure there's a good equity in terms of the effort that we put in and the effort the customer puts in, and that it's going to be a reasonable business proposition. In the old days, the salesperson wanted every piece of business they could get. And of course, we rewarded them for that. Well, that encourages salespeople to bring in unprofitable business. We have to have metrics much more based on profitability than on sales volume.
Where did your passion for sales come from?
Well, I will tell you a secret, but don't tell anyone this. When I was a university professor, I had developed some methods for measuring the interaction between people, for counting how often people used certain kinds of behaviors and seeing what impact it had. And I was using these measures to study, for example, therapists working with patients. Why do some therapists have a better cure rate than others? Is their behavior different? Or teachers and students. What's a good teacher doing? What behaviors are they using? And one day somebody said to me, you should use this method to look at sales. And I said, never. You know, sales, that's, ooh, I'm a respectable person. I'm a good researcher. And they said, well, can you answer me a question? And I said, what? How is it that in the average sales force, the top 10% of salespeople are outperforming the bottom 10% by a factor that always exceeds 3 to 1? If it was a factory and people were working on machines, you'd never have someone who's producing 3 times as much as another. And if you did, you'd quickly have a team in studying and understanding how they did it. In sales, we didn't have any ideas at all. And when I thought about that, I thought that is an interesting problem. It really is. And so I started to do some research. And the more I looked at selling, the more interesting it got. Because many of my assumptions about selling turned out not to be true. And as we looked more closely, we found that selling is a very sophisticated, complex set of skills, and very worthwhile.
Is technology changing the way people buy?
Oh yes, enormously. The most important change is information. It used to be that customers didn't know what choices they had. Well, now most customers have become very sophisticated. They can find on the internet everything they need to know about products and alternatives. And so in the past they may have heard of your product and perhaps a little bit about one competitor. Today they know about every competitor. So information has changed that, and your competitors, who maybe used to be local, now are much more global, because that information is accessed much more easily. And the other thing that's done is it's made people very impatient about spending time with salespeople. Because, for example, if I'm a purchasing agent and I'm buying things for my company, I can see 5 or 6 salespeople a day, but I can go to 80 websites and I can place orders. And it's much more efficient. Why do I need to have a talking brochure sit across the table to tell me about products when I could use technology of the internet to find out all I know much more easily? And that's changed things on the buying side. Technology has had another really big impact on the selling side. CRM systems mean that customer data can be accessed by different channels and by different locations. So that, for example, 10 years ago, I would have to go to my bank, and if I went to a branch in another city, they'd make me fill in forms and write my address down. Now they can access it, they know it, and it's become much more convenient for me, the consumer. And so information systems have acted as a kind of lubricant to make the interaction between seller and buyer go much more smoothly.
Neil, thank you so much for your interview to HSM Specials at Management TV. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.